what happened was the branch, it was a skinny branch, and I was actually looking down at the ground and walking, not looking.
Let me just make
Yeah,
sure.
and so then it went right in, and I
17.
actually had to pull out to get it to back out. That's so gross.
Retreat at 5:30.
The downside was I couldn't focus on my
Catherine. Gentlemen, tour 7:45.
And also, you
Yeah.
can't open it too, because it's
Not right now.
kind of hope to your eye.
People want to go to BOCES.
But it's much better.
That's the one you're talking about, right? High school graduation.
I start, I stop, I start. I find different. I could probably.
Oh, no, that's a different one. That's the one. That's the
State,
No, Berkshire is a couple of streets over.
Okay, because there's an estate sale, I'm from an area was asking me
Yeah.
what this house looked like.
Make sure it's still on.
I know a young woman that's everybody's young, she's not that old. Taking something from Grand Canyon University online, and she has, kind of kept me up on what she's doing.
Yeah.
Like, it's no, I'm not really.
She's one of those people that has a job
Down again.
for education.
There's a house that's sitting at the end of that cul-de-sac.
Her getting the job that they gave it to her. I'm pretty sure she can do it.
Oh, yeah. I know that they did some remodeling because for the longest time they had kitchen people out front, but I'm pretty sure it's been vacant for a very long time and that there's relatives or somebody that's just maintaining it.
Okay.
So you can tell,
I think people thought it was time.
Who's moving in? She didn't tell me.
I've always thought that. If they have an open house,
Open house and I was like 4.
say a four?
It doesn't say anything.
Sitting all by herself.
Bring your frequency, which means that you need a ton.
I so want to go look at the house, right? Yeah. I mean, we pretty much did that with our house. We gutted it.
We're trying to like on the fence. Do we? Don't we? Our house is new, but it needs stuff. And we're kind of like, should we? So.
Actually, Grace.
20 seconds.
Just reminds me, I want to ask your mom about the Saturday's tournament because I
Speech and debate. I was gonna go, but I don't know if I can go. This is the first I can.
Take out Sean the bike.
nobody has told me how to do it. It's on the top, it's like as you go.
All right, seconds.
No, I wanted to get
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
more information.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't have any announcements other than I would just like to thank all the administrators for being here tonight. This is a very important session in that it really provides a lot of insight and details on the board-specific broad goals that tend to get communicated, and often it's very important to just see how these things evolve in your world and your actions. A lot of what we try to do is to make improvements in the district, and in your world, you're often dealing with a lot of day-to-day crises, day-to-day action, but ultimately, we really need your eyes focused at certain times in the day when you have time on advancing the educational efforts within the district. And we really rely on this as a great way to get feedback as to how the process works. That being said, I just want to do the quick intro that this is a study session which is designed for the purpose of administrative updates to the board. No public comments here. Residents are may attend the next scheduled meeting on March 10th and or contact the board via email. All questions come into the office of the Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and the superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions, concerns typically are addressed by the superintendent and or designee. So that in mind, I'll turn it over to Dr. Robinson for superintendent comments.
So thank you very much, Mr. Preston, and to the board. As Mr. Preston mentioned, this is a pretty important meeting, and we had a principals meeting today. Ironically that you said that. And one of the things I expressed to the principals and respective district level administrators that When you think about the organization, Shannon is the school district. In any given year, between general fund, capital fund, federal aid funds, we probably spend a good $250 million. When you think about that, 225 plus million. And so when you think about that from a standpoint of as an organization, when we report out on the investments and the yield from that investment, in many ways, this is what this is. The last board meeting, we had the mid-year financial update. So you had some sense of where we are from a fiscal perspective and fiscal health of the school district, not only for the remainder of this year, but as we look down the road 3 years. And so as we talk about that from a program perspective tonight, keep that context. It's not meant to be all-inclusive because we'll be here for a 2-day retreat instead of a short of 2 hours of presentation. And I was going to say hour and a half, but Sarah Chaffee said she's going to try to go 20 minutes extra. So we'll be hiring a new E&L person after tonight. But on a very serious note, though, it is an opportunity for us to really, really focus in on the things that's happening within the school district. So I'm just going to spend just a couple minutes here just to kind of recap, so to speak, so to provide a context. And the big picture context is that when you look at this particular grid, we have those 5 pieces that we talk about engagement. In terms of what are the things that we're doing to engage our students. So you're going to hear a lot about that tonight. You're going to hear across program levels, different things people are doing to not only engage our students, but also to make the experience of school much more engaging for students. Talking about innovation. What are the things that we're trying to tap into so we can actually maximize this personal strength and create different learning opportunities for kids? So again, you're going to hear some of those common threads across the respective goals and levels tonight. Cultural competence. Equity and opportunities outcome is ultimately what we're trying to do. At the end of the day, every parent send their child to school with blind faith that we're going to do what's in their best interest. Not just what might be on average, but truly trying to figure out what's in the best interest of most kids, most of the time, if not all kids, all of the time. The global collaboration. It's interesting that we sit here and we talk about what's happening in other countries and how it's having a grave impact on our country. And for people who don't think that we live in the global world, I don't know what rock you're living under. And so when we think about then how we then prepare our kids to have that global mindset. And that global mindset is recognizing that you're part of a larger whole, and your goal is how are you adding value to the larger whole and not necessarily your own selfish pursuits. And the last piece, the whole collective worker responsibility, recognizing that we as a school system, we are as good as the community, the larger community, internal and external community that embrace our efforts. And so that's why this presentation, even tonight, to the Board of Education that represent the respective voices of the community, as well as people who might be watching us via the live stream taping of our session tonight, is that we want to make sure that people understand and appreciate that the job of being a leader for learning is something that everyone takes seriously. And all the people who will be presenting tonight, they're not only representing their respective roles and responsibilities, but more important, the collective role, the over 2,200 bodies that we employ as a school district to make sure that this system works and works well for kids. So let's kind of put that in context as we move forward. 3 big pieces we talk about all the time is the relevance of what we're doing. We can't have a system that we're resting on status quo and our laurels. We always have to have a system that's constantly evolving so we remain relevant. So we make sure that we're talking about what are the best things that we can do so the experience of kids is one that's always constantly changing, constantly evolving, constantly getting better. So you're going to hear about things like alternative schedule that we're going through that process now over the last 18 months to say what would the next generation of school experience be like for the next 10 years for kids. We know what the last 60 years been like. So what does the next 10 years, the next 20 years going to look like? And how technology has changed some of those kind of things. Being responsive, again, using that whole notion of being responsive is not necessarily even being responsive to technology, so to speak, but just responsive to the various needs of kids. And you've seen over time, you talk about different special education programming. You heard a presentation from talking about Sarah Chaffee about how we have evolved with E&L services, how we're responding to the various needs of our changing demographic, student demographic. And the last piece about being responsible, because this is a big piece of it. At the end of the day, whatever we do, we may not necessarily get it right the first time, but our intentions always have to be right. We always have to come at it from the right intention. And the right intention is trying to do what's in the best interest of our students. So those things become important. This little graphic, the board has seen it many times, and when you think about it, at the end of the day, we go through this whole process, starting with our mission, and then we start with that piece of it. It's equity and outcome for the individual students that we serve. And so this is how the process kind of unfolds. And so what you're seeing now is a combination of those kind of things, because as a leadership team, we function from, at least from my vantage point, and I would think most people say it, probably use different words, from two different, if you want to say, credos. One is that it's not who gets credit, but what we get credit for. Because at the end of the day, the strength of our system is a synergy of our efforts. How well we collectively work together drives essentially what we do as a system. So that becomes an important piece of it as well. And the goal areas you'll hear tonight, we're going to walk through the goal areas by goal areas and by program levels, by goal areas, by program level. So it makes a much more seamless transition for not only for you listening, but also for the presenters coming. So I'm not sure I won't hit each one of those, but you see those school and classroom experience, organizational culture, professionalism, and fiscal responsibility. Those are the things drive what we do. And we often say that if what we're doing doesn't fit into one of those categories, we have to ask ourselves, why are we doing it? Or we have to ask ourselves, do we need to redefine those categories in some ways? So that's what the board is going to hear to tonight. So you're going to have elementary folks come up, then middle school folks come up for those respective goal areas to make a very seamless progression. And certainly if there are burning questions that you have that you can't hold, you could ask that one burning question, but just for the sake of continuity, if we kind of share some thoughts, jot some thoughts down at the end, we try to extra at the end of each goal area, we'll pause to capture questions related to that goal, because you may ask a question that might be answered by the next presenter coming up. So we want to make sure that we go through each goal area, and we ask questions, each goal area and ask questions. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're excited about tonight, so turn it over to the elementary folks. And I'm modeling for folks. There's a piece of paper that says stand here, and stand here is here, not here. So Mr. Pace is going to model for us.
There you go.
Stand here.
I think I was
I'll click.
clicking. You're
I'll click.
clicking. All right. So I'm just going to forewarn you that I got the great slide. So being the veteran staff member who's actually presenting, I'm going to take a little more time on this slide, but the next two that I present later in the evening will be much briefer. These are actually great things that are happening right now in elementary. The counselors are using NetSmarts to present some digital citizenship in grades K through 5. And then in addition to that, at Superintendent Conference Day, 3 through 5 was given some additional training. I think it's on 5 lessons that they can present to their students at those grade levels. And we actually had a little bit of a reminder to make sure that teachers are presenting that to the students, so that was sent out. So we've got some interesting stuff there, and we are expanding those extra 5 lessons. I believe that they're working on those now for grades K through 2. In addition to that, we had the name project done in a lot of the buildings in the fall. Thanks to the lab aides and Gal Petrofessa and Holly Green, we had the students taped, and they pronounced their name, and then that went into SIS. So on the summary page, if we are calling a parent, or if we're speaking to a student, or if a teacher's in the classroom wants to make sure they are pronouncing that name correctly, they can click on that screen and get the exact pronunciation from the student's voice. There's a residual value to that. When you get on SIS, you see that picture of that student, which is SIS, and you realize that you're working with more than data. So sometimes when we're getting a little bit deeper into something, that helps. But there's nothing like hearing a kindergartner or a first grade or a second grade little voice saying their name, and you realize that these are little kids. So it's actually fun going through that. We also have the Student Voice Project that has been going on with Anna Sugarman. I believe Shattuckon has completed it. We are going through it currently at Tisago. We do basically an exit interview with grade 5 students. We have about 5 questions. A lot of value to that with the building, because we are hearing right from the voices of the students, the good, the bad, the ugly, and a lot more good than anything else. But we can see the improvements that we can make, but it's great hearing it in their voices. So Tisago is still kind of waiting that final clip, and I'll have a faculty meeting. And again, when you hear something in a student voice responding to those questions, there's a great deal of power to it. It also is great for the students, because they realize that they have a voice, and they're in this very professional setting. They're with their principal, they're with Anna. Anna does a great job facilitating this meeting with them, And I think there's a great deal of pride with those students in being a part of that. The other big one that I'm pretty proud to be a part of, Armin Spoelstra is leading the charge on the special ed calibration, and this is for those special programs. So at Tasaga, we have the MOVE program, and we have Connections. And then Connections is very close to the TSD program that's over in Carrigan. And then we also have the FSD programs in Octay and Shattuckon. And when we look at trying to figure out where those students go, Armin had a very good process where we were actually looking at, she had some good ideas as far as looking at the observation form to actually see what we're putting down on the observation form that fits a connection student. So when we're looking at potential students coming in, it helped really calibrate the entire special ed special programs. So kudos to all the people involved, teachers, Armin, the whole 9 yards. So thanks for all of that. The other thing is Michelle Gabri-Huba is working on the Accelerated Math and Quest program and including more students. We did a ESSA review in the summer, the administrators did, and I think it was telling when we looked at subgroups and we wanted to see, are we hitting all of the needs in all those different areas, not only in maybe extra help that they need, but are we actually hitting the students who could be accelerated? So we've kind of made that pool of students that we're actually testing a little bit bigger. We're looking at the testing with a critical eye to make sure that there isn't any bias within that testing. And I think we're doing a better job there as well. So the proof will be in actually the outcomes that we get from that, but I'm pretty proud of those efforts that she's making as well. So that's what I have. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Kathleen Stranges, Academic Administrator for ELA, AIS, and Social Studies K-5. So I'm so glad to see this icon present on the slide. You see it on your handouts there because it shows that cyclical conversation that has to occur. Dr. Robinson referred to that. Mr. Pace just shared some improvement efforts, and the improvement efforts on this slide speak to our response to data. And so ESSA is Every Student Succeeds app, and it provides a lot of information for us to look at various populations with various lenses in that way. But it is a difficult conversation to have in terms of drilling down to what's most meaningful and impactful for students. And so we've had some additional training this year with Teresa Billington, our BOCES Director of Curriculum and Instructional Data. And that's not a one-time. It's very important to come back and have those conversations over and over again as it realizes that you impact that little voice and that little picture that Mr. Pace is referring to. So super important to always go back to the students. And I think we try to do that even in some of the other meeting structures that we have in place that show this cyclical piece. We do that with our RTI, our response to intervention teams. We do that with our instructional support teams because, again, it's about responding to what the student needs. And so team review is important and appropriate there, as well as the special ed department. The administrators have been meeting in buildings to try to make that conversation more personal and impactful to student by student conversations, and as well teacher conversations, so that they may share pedagogical practices that they have found to be most impactful. So again, always on that continuous learning cycle piece. And as I talk about the improvement planning, certainly we want to be better tomorrow than we are today, as always. This part speaks to the classroom experience part. And its delivery and its curriculum. So super excited to share that we've had new science kits delivered in our K-5 buildings this year, some professional development that goes along with that. Our teachers have been going out to BOCES to be trained in that, and those kits are multi-purpose and hands-on, so a lot of conversation about the setting up, the taking down, and the inquiry approach that the students are using. We took that inquiry approach, that conversation about research, about investigative kind of practices, and we brought that through into social studies this year. And so in our grades 3 through 5, we have a new social studies textbook. And the textbook is sort of a different vision. When I say textbook, you may have a vision of a stand and deliver. But in these programs, the textbook is a resource, very much like a primary source document would be, or a secondary source document. So it's used as almost like a research journal. And then from there, you launch into online, the tools that you can use digitally and online. And as well then going into the elementary summit. So that's a term we use very freely, but those are our meeting structures in the beginning of the year. And so we meet with every K-5 teacher, and we bring our sister schools together. So in the course of 12 to 14 days, actually, we're able to have great conversations with teachers about practices, their new tools. Sometimes we look at data during that time. This particular year, we were very interested in the rollout of the next generation learning standards. And so we took that conversation right from the beginning of the year, knowing that we had new science, knowing that we had new social studies, and we tied that all together into that inquiry approach. And so often it's important, and the research points out, so important that our teachers understand the recipe behind the standards. So it's not just, yes, the standards are prepared on this page and you can take that from your manual, but when you put that into practice, that's a different scenario. And so some of us, myself included, had to go back and really look at that wording and then clearly translate that into the articulation of what does that mean for learning for our students. So we had great conversations about the clarity and the success criteria needed, knowing that we had these new tools coming on board. Okay?
Good evening, Robin Gores from the middle school. Really proud to be a part of an administrative team that's worked for the past 2.5 years on developing an alternate schedule and really looking at things to promote such as engaged classroom, authentic learning, reducing the number of transitions for students and for student and teacher wellness and certainly their mental health. So that was started about 2.5 years ago. About a little over a year ago, 30 plus teachers and administrators really started to embark on that journey to try to find that perfect schedule that would meet a bunch of different criteria, but also that would preserve the wonderful programming that we do have here at Shenendehowa. And also answer some of those questions as to why we were even originally looking at the alternate schedule. And we have made tremendous progress. After all this work, we have come up with an 80-minute, which would be a 4x4 block that we're both the middle school and high school are looking at, which is super exciting, and it was most favorable by both committees. And over the next couple of weeks and in the past couple of weeks, we have been introducing that schedule to the middle school and to the high school, talking about what would that look like for a teacher schedule? What would that look like for a student schedule? What are the questions and concerns? And we are in the process of doing that. Another key part of that process is looking at professional development for our staff. Several of us have already engaged in some professional development. This Friday, we have a large crew that is going to be teachers and administrators that are going to be working professional development, our upcoming superintendent's conference day. So we have a lot of work to do. We've done a tremendous amount of work, and I'm really proud of our committee. And I wish more could be here to present this particular piece because it's such a large, powerful group. But a very exciting time for us in the middle and for the high school. I feel like because we're trying to go short, but boy, there's so much that goes into that. More specifically in terms of the middle school here, Greg had already mentioned the digital citizenship, and I'm so happy to hear that the K-5 is also working with the digital citizenship, as well as the 9-12. We, at the middle school, have done it now for the last couple of years, but we did utilize the new, they came up with a whole new curriculum coming into this school year. So we had 20 different teachers that were trained this past spring, and then they turnkey trained every single teacher in the middle school. Subsequently, in the fall, they provided lessons for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Every single student received 6 different lessons. And what's really exciting now is we really need that vertical articulation. The curriculum is set for the K-12, but really start to look at, because maybe there are some things that we don't need to do necessarily with our 6th graders, or maybe there's some things we need to reinforce more, or maybe the 9th grade, and so on. So that's really exciting for us to continue to do that, but it's so important for our students to just see it's a great tool, our Chromebooks, and the use of media, but they need to understand the citizenship that goes along with that as well. And as Greg mentioned as well about the name project, this is really an exciting thing for us to have our students. I can tell you specifically, we're working our way through all 3 middle schools. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have all of our students that have their name and have said their name. And I'll tell you, if you're in one of the schools and ask one of the principals, if you're in Guyana at some point, ask me and I can have, you can hear it. It's pretty nice because, I know my own name. People say my last name incorrectly all the time, and that's fine. But, it'd be interesting to hear some of our kids that once you hear them say it, you'll say it correctly. And every kid deserves to have their name said correctly. So exciting time.
Thank you. John Burns, principal of Acadia Middle School. And, in Dr. Robinson's first slide tonight, he talked about engagement. And engagement, we've been meeting that. We've been talking about student voice, as you heard from Mr. Pace, and you may hear again from the high school. Student voice is a district initiative that we've embraced. And we've really enjoyed the results that we've got so far from it. We identify groups of students. We meet with those students, we talk to them, we videotape those students, and then we put together a video, and then we'll talk about that in a second. But we then use those videotapes with our staff, talk about those, and we have so far had two areas that we focused on. The first one being instructional practices that the students like, that they find really stimulate them in the classroom. And now we're focusing on school climate. And as Mr. Pace said, we couldn't do this without the help of Anna Sugarman. So I'd like Anna just to talk for a minute about the Student Voice project we have.
So this is year 2 of a 5-year goal. And so anything that, needs traction, it takes 5 years really to get it embedded into an institutional level. So last year, for example, what Mr. Burns was talking about is that we looked at a group of students and just asked them questions about how do you learn best? What about the Chromebooks? Are they working for you? Are they not working for you? What does the teacher do to enable you to learn better? What's working as far as instructional strategies, videos, usage, all types of things. So we had a number of questions last year and then shifted it again to climate this year. What about homework? What about the study halls? What are they like for you? What are you experiencing with the aides and the monitors in the hallway? Do you feel safe? Those kind of questions. So those are the things that we did specifically in Acadia. Last year we had 6 schools that participated in the Voice Project. And this year so far we have 4, one including Maddie Campbell is an administrative intern, and she's taking it with the twist of grading, asking the students about the grading practices that we have in place, which is a very interesting piece with it. And I just wanted to show this came out from the National Professional Development Association, which is called Learning Forward, and this is the latest issue. So we were 2 years ahead of the game with this in this process. So hopefully within 5 years, the outcomes that we're looking for long-term is that teachers and administrators, transportation, everybody will be embedded in this quest to ask students, what's really working for you? How do we help you learn better? How do we make the environment more conducive to learning? Because they are consumers. It's all over the world. Everywhere we go, they're asking us. Whether you're going in a bathroom in an airport or anywhere, people are asking you, how about the service? What's working for you and what's not? And the students deserve that. So with this, we start, when we do the audio taping, it's totally without any kind of video, except in the beginning of our videos that we share with staff, that include a portion where I go out and I ask random students, why do teachers know, and what do they need to know, how you learn best? Why is that important? So we have 2 young men that I grabbed in the hall. Oh, you got it back. Just click. I hope you can hear it.
So, it's important for teachers to know what helps the students best, because if the kids aren't learning best from what the teachers are doing, then they're not getting the experience they need, and teachers aren't doing their job correctly.
Kind of like what he said, teachers need to learn from their past experiences and also multiply on them so that they realize that things can work better for the next batch of students that they get every year.
That's our voices.
That's it. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it. In terms of our ENL population at the middle school, a lot of great things going on to make the educational experience the best we can make it for these students. They have some obstacles to overcome, some hurdles, and we're trying to improve that experience on many different levels. One of the things is the program quality review, helping schools understand where are we on this continuum. All right, where do we fall in right now, and what can we do to improve? What are we doing that works really well? So that whole quality review that the schools are undertaking is a very positive step for the ENL population and for that program. The ENL profiles. If you make something accessible to people, they're going to access it. So one of the things we found in the past is that it wasn't quite as easy for teachers to get the information they needed about these students and other students in other areas. So now there's the profiles uploaded in SIS, the Infinite Campus, and teachers with a click of a mouse can click on these students, get the information they need in regards to these students. And again, with the ease comes the use. And we have a much increased use of that, a much more informed staff helping our population. And again, the technology progressing, what we did this year was we did the online grade 6 to 7 selection for the language the students will be taking in 7th grade. In the past, you'd bring home a piece of paper, the students and parents would discuss it, circle a language, bring it back, and we'd be weeks inputting that information into the computer. Now we use a Google form, the selection is made, we have that information immediately. So it's made it easier for the families, and quite frankly, it's made it easier for our schools. And when we have that information that quick, we then know how many kids want Spanish, how many kids want French. We can create our schedule and our sections based upon that information. And the last thing in regards to the ENL population is the Arburn training. They offer programs, they offer trainings across the board using research-based practices to improve results. And this is, again, talking about the science department having taken advantage of this. Arburn is the regional bilingual educational resource network. So they come into the schools and work with the teachers, helping them create better practices to use with our student population. The focus these days on mental and emotional health. Our counselors are deeply engaged in trainings, helping them. I think Mrs. Carmen's going to touch on this a little bit later. And again, the same type of thing with our CPS and our probation, just helping our staff to better understand the regulations, the laws out there. In fact, this morning we had CPS in our building doing a training on mandated reporting for our teachers, which again, we know about, but every so many years it's good to review that. And unfortunately, we have to use that once in a while, and it's good for teachers to understand the parameters with which that is used. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Sean Natt. I'm the Dakota Middle School principal. I've got the next couple slides. I'm going to try to highlight a couple things from those as we go. One of the things we're really trying to focus at the middle school is to make sure that we're really drilling down to the individual level with every single student in terms of individual indicators. And really, globally, we know we always look really good, show high achievement globally, but we're really trying to achieve continuous improvement for all of our students. So I'm going to focus on two things, academic and social emotional needs of some of our students, and how we're using that data and certain data. One of the things we started with was the ESSA review of the data and really started looking at the subgroups. Some of us received some level ones in terms of that, in terms of the MIPS. And that really was helpful to look at, okay, where are we in terms of chronic absenteeism, progress, again, our achievement, our global indicators are fantastic, but really, how can we get down there on some of those other things? One of the other things we use is one of our staples is our quarterly data reports. You can see across the bottom of this slide, there's all of those categories. If you look at it horizontally, that is color-coded. It's sort of our watchtower data, I guess you would say. Red, students may be failing. Yellow, they could be in jeopardy. It could deal with grades, attendance, etc. We look at that with our ISTs all of the time. One of the newer things at the middle school level, at least, is we're really diving into the eDoctrina this year. We have these student summary reports that are fantastic. They show any teacher who uses that with any test, we can pull it up at an IST meeting, an instructional support team meeting for a struggling student. We can look at that data. It shows how they did on that assessment and where they stood to everybody in the entire middle school complex. So that can be really helpful to see, to try to pinpoint some of the things that we're doing, and especially in terms of the RTI process, which can become very difficult. How do you find where kids are struggling, specifically what skills do they need? How can we target those with interventions? So we're always looking to revise that. We did a little bit of revision with some of our forms, et cetera, and our process this year as well. The other piece is the social emotional piece. that we looked at. I call this sort of building bridges. Right off the rip from the beginning of the year, we're trying to take people who are in positions to help students, our teachers, our staff, our faculty, and put them in a position to either help students or direct them where to go. We started right off, we met with CPS right off the bat. We had them come in, meet with all the counselors. We had Saratoga County Probation there as well, and a couple other agencies. And it was very informative for all the staff, all the faculty, so that they could see what was going on. We then brought that back. We had Ms. Carmen come in and really talk about our support services, and again, putting those people in places to build bridges for students so they can get the help that they need. And that should take it to that slide. So I'm going to also highlight a couple things. We really wanted to focus on a few groups. You've already heard some of this year as well. The two groups I'm going to focus on in this slide are our struggling readers, number one, and our E&L students. Again, with the focus of trying to individualize it for every single student. I'll talk about the reading first of all. One of the things we thought we were doing was maybe focusing a little bit too much on two screenings, one called the PI, one called the RI. And what we did is we implemented multiple measures. So now we actually have 6 measures that we can screen a student in reading: Dibbles, Pass, Tower, Woodcock 3, and the RI and PI. Those are 3 of the screenings we use to really pinpoint where are the reading deficits, how can we get them most appropriate placed in any type of remedial reading, and go from there. So that was one of the really good success stories, I think, from this year, and we're continuing to look at our reading program, as you're going to hear throughout the evening tonight. Finally, our E&L students, we are only, I think, the 2nd district in Suburban Council to voluntarily participate in the E&L quality review, as John had mentioned. And really, we're just trying to get ahead of the curve. If you were flagged in that area through ESSA, this is the review that you would go through at a school. We're doing it because we want to know, what are we doing well? What can we do better? And how can we best support those students? Again, at an individual level. One example I'll give already is when John talked about the Arborn Society coming in. I did an observation the other day, and a teacher used a picture. And she used it just as a starter. There didn't happen to be an E&L student in that classroom, but she got it from the E&L training, and it was phenomenal the way they had to relate and had to create conversations on this image right off the bat. This is one of the techniques, one of the strategies that we learned, and hopefully we're going to get out of this quality review. We started it on Monday. We worked with Tisago, had about 20 teachers there with 4 people from the Arborn Society, and we went through a whole day training. And then the next 2 Thursdays, we're going to be doing observations, focus groups, etc. Hopefully see what we're doing well and where we can make improvements, again, to focus down on those individual students and help them as best we can.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Sherwin, Academic Administrator for English. And from an academic perspective, it's all about the cycle of instruction. So all of the items on this slide and the next pertain to the cycle of instruction. So I'm going to kind of talk about them as one. You, I'm sure, are all familiar with the cycle of instruction. That's the graphic that has students at the center, and then curriculum, instruction, and assessment revolving around, represents the ongoing process of our academic work. It is the heart of everything that we do. And this year, the cycle of instruction, the graphic, and embedded into it, a draft curriculum review tool is starting to be used by teachers. We're using it when teams of teachers get together in PLC work, and it's being used in curriculum work as teachers get together to work on specific courses. The graphic has also been the motivation for us to reignite a conversation about curriculum mapping. A group of us have gotten together to really articulate the why of mapping, because it is so important in the academic work that we do. It has led to some research that we've done on tools other than Rubicon Atlas, which may streamline the mapping process and make it more meaningful for teachers. The cycle also represents the work that we're doing on using assessment data. Teams of teachers are now analyzing common assessment data cyclically, almost quarterly in many cases, to determine how students are doing and identify next steps for instruction. And this is now including a look at subgroup data. So teachers are now, we are raising awareness for how all of our populations of students are doing, and teachers are having conversations where they're seeing if we have a certain population that's performing 10 or more percentage points lower than all students on a common assessment, who are these students and what are we doing about this? And putting the names and the faces on these populations, on the percentages, has really been powerful for teachers. So the cycle also relates to the work that we are doing using multiple measures of achievement to proactively identify students for enrichment and acceleration at the middle level. And it also has been the motivation for conversations that we're having about best practices in grading, which is a continuation of work we've been doing for several years. But it's also part of a new movement that is growing, where teachers are really jumping on the standards-based grading bandwagon and starting to explore more progressive grading practices, and that's very exciting. Thank you.
She just combined a lot of stuff.
I combined 2 slides.
Thank you.
See, that's efficiency. Thank you, Ms. Sherman, for modeling that for us.
Right by me. Hi, I'm Lisa Young. I'm the academic administrator in the middle schools for special education. And this slide actually really goes along with what exactly Kathleen Sherman was talking about. And it goes along with more about the collective work that we're doing as a team. The first point on this slide talks about the collaborative work actually that Kathleen Sherwin, myself, and Carrie Peverly, and the middle school principals did working with co-teaching teams. Because the exciting work that we did with the co-teaching teams really was about raising awareness on co-teaching, raising awareness on what we're doing in the classroom. We started out with a lot of surveys. We surveyed a lot of the co-teaching teams. We asked them what was going on in their classroom, what they were doing with planning, how it was working for them, how they felt about co-teaching, what they thought the impact was on their students. From there, we met with the co-teaching teams one-on-one. And that took a number of days, but the powerful conversations that came from that was exciting. And what we're doing with that information, I think, is going to be even more exciting because we learned so much about the engagement that was needed, the growth that it may be needed. We talked about the strengths, some of the weaknesses, some of the supports that may be needed, and some of the positive outcomes that we want to encourage from those conversations. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to kind of implement more evidence-based programs, more supports for teaching, and move forward with some changes in our curriculum and our programming around co-teaching from that. The other part of that was how to infuse the special education staff with the next gen standards. So that was another piece of that important conversation. In order to work towards implementing the next gen standards, we really had to assess. We had to assess the current student performance. We did that both collectively as a department by many academic departments, also solely within the special education department. And once we reviewed our continuum of services, both within special education and outside of special education, we reviewed our instructional data and worked together within the departments to kind of look at that data and then move forward from there. So in order to maximize those experiences for our students, we really had to look at our standards, review the curriculum maps amongst everyone, and then align those next gen standards in order to improve the student achievement. So that slide talks along with what Kathleen just talked about as well.
Hello, Ron Gussanoni, principal at the high school. As I sit here and watch, a lot of the things we were talking about, it's woven through the fabric of what we do, so it's exciting from the high school perspective to see. We could be saying a lot of the same things that are being said elementary and middle. I think that's the idea of this goal process and what we do. And as you look on our slide, we talk about the learning process. And professional development has been mentioned is really important to us as administrators and really important to our teachers. And sometimes we run into the time perspective, like, well, we just don't have time to do it. When are we going to get together? We can't meet and discuss this, right? We have this other. So we're doing it through Google Classroom, right? Students use Google Classroom, now the adults are using it, and we're doing a book study on trauma, as we're talking about being responsive to students. A lot of our students undergo different types of trauma in their life. So you'll hear about presentations we did in faculty meetings, but that has turned into a book study done on Google Classroom. Teachers will respond with questions. We'll throw questions out. Kristen Lena McMahon's actually leading it, so she'll throw questions out. Teachers will respond, and it's amazing the responses you get and the times you get them, because everyone's life is different. So some teachers or administrators will respond at 11 o'clock at night or 4 o'clock in the in the morning because it works for their schedule, but it's learning that's taken place that would not be able to without using the technology. So not only are students using it, we're using it. It's really working out well for us to kind of engage in this professional learning. The common threads with digital literacy, K-12, there's a curriculum that is given to all of our students. So that's a common theme that goes through. But at the high school, you'll see something up there called GAT Shield, and we work with IMS, and it's really an opportunity to do digital literacy on an individual basis. And sometimes it comes from something a student's not supposed to do. So how that works is if a student does something on their Chromebook that is not appropriate, it gets flagged, right, for a string of words or thoughts or whatever. That will get sent to the grade level administrators, myself, and then we have an opportunity to meet with the student and really talk about their digital footprint. Right? You are doing this can impact you later. So not only do they get it in this grand scope, but they get it individually when students are doing things. Give us opportunity to talk to parents when things happen that are not supposed to. Additionally, you might hear about it as we talk about threat assessment later. It gives us the opportunity to see if a student is struggling with something, maybe social emotional, and then we can get right on that, and that kind of takes a different priority level as we move through. Microaggression and mediation, sometimes we don't give students enough credit that they can do mediation. So I'm thinking of certain instances earlier in the fall. I see Mr. Heckman back there. We had a situation where like there's no way we can do a mediation with this, and we did, and it turned into a mediation for the families in the parking lot, which it was quite amazing to see. Like we didn't give enough credit that they were able to do that, and we worked through this mediation. We do microaggression training with students as well. Also taking technology to use it for our special education population. When students are testing, if they need to use computers, if they have typing for their accommodations for testing, instead of moving students to a lab or making it an interrupted situation for students, we've been able to work with IMS and work with them as a team to create this kiosk mode so they can use their Chromebooks. It goes into a certain mode. You can't access the internet. You can't get spell check, all the things that you're not supposed to be able to do on a test, but you do have access to word processing. So that's been a nice thing that we've been able to develop this year. Just started that in January. Alternative scheduling, Robin said it wonderfully. I could stay here and talk about alternative scheduling for the next 2 hours. I know that will not be allowed, but it's really been a team atmosphere. And I think Robin said she was proud of the team. I am. It's not a committee. It's really a team that we've come together over the past 16, 17 months. The work that's been done, it's amazing. And we established these norms. People are positive, they're curious, they ask questions, they push back. And now we're to the phase, and you'll hear more about alternative scheduling, I'm sure, as we go through the next days, weeks, months, is for our committee to disseminate the information to the masses in a way to understand they have not gone through this process for the last 18 months. So as we put these presentations together, we have to keep in mind, well, they have not met 50 times or whatever it's been. They haven't had these full-day trainings. So we're really working on now, how do we communicate this so everyone can kind of understand the positives and the benefits and the excitement of the alternative scheduling process. And the last thing I'll mention up here is it mentions English for access and technology and apps, but it's really all departments, and it speaks to the efficiency of our district and what we use and how we use those things and why is it best for students. Not like, well, here's the new shiny app, let's use it. It's more about what is it going to do for student performance, how is it going to engage students. So I know the English department has done something formal, but it's really, I think, all of our academic departments do that. Something that's really cool, I know you've heard about before, the college essay writing clinic. I see some head nods. It's a wonderful thing. We have faculty members volunteer. They come down to our counseling center. Students in the fall can go there after school, and they get their college essays read. It's a stressful process writing the college essay. Our students, they stress about it. So then they can meet with a professional, one of our teachers, to kind of give them feedback where they think they should head. And sometimes it's just a little bit of feedback that gives a student a spark, and they go off and they feel better, and it makes that whole process a little easier. As easy as we can make it. It's a stressful process, but we try to make it a little easier. And kudos to Sarah Chaffee and the biliteracy team. We have the seal of biliteracy now. It's an endorsement on the diploma. It's relatively new in New York State. We jumped right on it. We had, I even checked with Sarah, 200 students go through this process. Presentations were awesome. It indicates students are proficient in more than one language, and that endorsement goes on a diploma. So that's a really high number. I'd love to see what other numbers are across the state. I'd put that up against a lot of schools. So it's really exciting that we have that here at Shen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucas Libera. I'm one of the associate principals from the high school. I'm going to be talking to you a bit about some of the work we've accomplished at the high school level in relation to the second objective of our students' classroom experiences. And the key word that this objective focuses on is equity. We want to make sure that each and every one of our students has the supports that they need as an individual to be successful. And we also want to make sure that each of our students has full access to all the wonderful programs that we offer at Shen. And this has to be a mindful and continuous part of our work. It can't be something that's just done in one or two locations and then discontinued. So we hope that this is a thread that works its way through all of the work that we do. This first slide has a few examples of both improvements to existing programs and also some new exciting supports that we have in place for our students this year. One thing that ties together a lot of these bullet points as well as some on the next few slides that I'll be talking about is the use of data. And one thing that we've been able to do is examine that data through this lens of equity. One example is how we were able to take the data that showed the long-term success of our alternative education program, the Aspire program at High School East, coupled with data that showed that some of the obstacles to graduation that our students faced often began in ninth grade. And so as a result of looking at those two things, we advocated for, we planned, and we executed the institution of the Aspire program at the ninth grade building, High School West. So we look forward to the continued success of all of our Aspire students, but especially those new ninth grade students that are now served by that program as well. Another example, we want to make sure that all of our students have equal access and encouragement to partake in our many advanced placement courses. And so one thing that we did recently was Building Leadership, and myself and the academic administrators had a chance to sit down and work with the senior director for New York State for College Board, who happens to be a Shen parent as well. And he was able to help us look at some ways to use PSAT data to try to identify some students that had a strong potential to do well in AP coursework. And the idea is that many of these students identified through over 1,300 PSAT tests that we administered this year may not see themselves as the typical AP student. And we want to make sure that they're aware that the data is showing that they have some strong potential and try to encourage them to get involved so that our students who are partaking and challenging themselves with that AP coursework remains a very diverse spectrum. The next slide highlights a few supports for students both in the academic setting and beyond. We recognize that students have a better overall experience, including academics, when they have a strong connection to their greater school community. And so the high school partnership team, in conjunction with the PTSA this year, planned and executed some club fairs at both High School East and High School West. And the focus of these club fairs was to try to get students who had never been involved in an activity or a club to participate so that they could try to find a connection to the many wonderful activities that we offer at Shen. Another project that's not up here, but we recently carried out through the partnership team is the Shen podcast. And the idea of that is that we're going to be producing a monthly podcast for students that focuses on some advice and guidance for them to navigate their way through Shen and even beyond to college and career. So we released our first episode just before the winter break, and that was a compilation of students, teachers, and administrators talking about ways that they deal with stress in their own personal lives. And the idea was that students could, A, understand that stress is something and mental health issues is something that we all deal with even as adults, and also give them some strategies to try to work through those type of problems. One theme that we'll see appear in the next slide, as well as several of the others that I'll go through, is again this focus on mental health, which is a serious concern for all of our students, especially some of our students who are struggling at the high school level. One of the things we see here is how support counselors worked in classroom circles to provide students with better coping skills. This is something that will be talked about a little bit later in some of our slides. In addition, our faculty members, as well as some of our special education aides, received trainings in areas like how to provide mental health first aid to students that might be in crisis, and also some valuable strategies to help some of our most at-risk learners, how to help them with new strategies in the classroom. In the next slide, we see some examples about how our academic leaders and our teachers started to explore, or continued to explore, their curriculum, their instruction, their assessment, their grading practices, again, through this important lens of equity, making sure that we're doing everything we can to serve all of our students. As you can see, this work has continued to ensure that our instructional practices align with the most recent research, standards, and other guidance so that we can help everyone be successful. We've also, as somebody mentioned earlier, we've seen a lot of teachers learning about and practicing some new standards-based grading as just another tool to help all of our learners be able to demonstrate their mastery of content. In this final slide, we kind of see how a lot of this broader work has started to, or has continued in more focused arenas, such as specific departments or even specific PLCs. One of the exciting things that we start to see here in this slide is some concrete examples of student success and also some new opportunities for students. One wonderful example that Mr. Agostoni mentioned briefly already is the seal of biliteracy. And this also applies to this objective here because, again, we had over 200 students who participated in this new program. And most importantly here, those students represented a very diverse spectrum of Shen students. It was a very wide variety of students that participated in that program. And now they have a new credential that will assist them in their lives beyond Shen. Additionally, all of our major core areas offer academic intervention services. One example up here of the success we've seen with AIS supports is the AIS supports that are embedded into our English 12 classes. And as a result, you know, at least in part of that AIS services, we saw 7 seniors this January pass the ELA exam. And that gave them the confidence to move forward through the spring semester, knowing that one more obstacle to their graduation has been removed. And that was an obstacle that they have previously not been successful with, likely last year in the June Regents. So again, a lot of great work happening here. We continue to try to focus on making sure that all of our work focuses not just on the majority, but on every learner in the district. Thank you.
Hello again. One slide this time. So like the cycle of instruction, the shift to new standards is very much at the heart of our academic work. We are doing such deep curriculum work this year at every level. Kathleen Strand just talked about what's happening at elementary. You've heard about what's happening at middle. Well, it's happening at high school as well. Teachers are working in teams to realign curriculum across subject areas, including math, English, social studies, and science. We are aligning all of our courses to the next-gen standards in science, English, and math, and the social studies framework. And in addition to these formal opportunities for teachers to get together and really practice unwrapping the standards and translating them into practical action steps that will help teachers develop skills in the classroom with students, we're infusing conversations about the new standards informally in post-conferences. How are you shifting to the new standards? How does this lesson reflect the shift to new standards? And Ron Agostoni talked about the alt scheduling and teaching in an extended block. Well, we're even able to have conversations in post-conferences. How might this lesson look different if you were able to teach it in an extended time period? Because shifting to an extended time period will require teachers to change their instructional practice and use different strategies. And we firmly believe that using different strategies and enhancing it with extended time will help students achieve the standards, the new standards. However, the shift to new standards has also been the motivation for some exciting collaboration with English and social studies teachers. Lisa Kissinger and I brought 9th and 10th grade English and social studies teachers together to collaborate on common skills in our subject areas that will support students on the new global studies regents. And the shift to new standards has also helped social studies teachers prepare for the new U.S. history regents, which will be given this June for the first time. Thank you.
Good evening. Michelle Mylod, Director of Special Education. As a district committed to excellence, we continuously strive to meet the needs of our ever-changing student body. This fall, our emphasis has been on supporting classroom teachers' knowledge of our students to better inform their instruction, increasing access to instructional technology, both for students and for staff, and maximizing our knowledge and implementation of highly engaging instructional opportunities, as you've heard largely through the work we are doing with the alt scheduling committee. We identify these priorities based on our review of student data, teacher feedback, and direct student reports, ensuring we receive input directly from our students on what they identify as critical factors for their success. So not only the work that Anna Sugarman is doing, but also work that we're doing at the high school and interviewing our students in resource room to see what do you identify as what has supported you as a student to be successful both emotionally in school and also academically. Equity is a theme throughout our district goal document and is the tapestry of our school community. This is a challenging and emotional, rewarding work that results in both personal growth and improved outcomes for our students. Our collective work this fall has focused on developing and implementing specialized programs for students and families, professional learning for our staff, and equitable hiring practices. The goal of this work is to provide our students and families with unfettered access to all that our schools have to offer, recognizing the diversity and unique needs of our students.
So you've heard a lot about updated standards and our work to adjust our curriculum to updated standards. And so I thought I would share with you a very specific example of what that means. When we say we're working to update and align with our standards, what is the work that's happening behind the scenes when we do that? So here is a framework that we use. So we look at the standard and we say, what is the knowledge that is needed? What are the skills that are needed? And what are the understandings that must be employed in order to really teach that standard? And so I'm going to give you an example. Here's a third grade reading standard focused on craft and structure. Discuss how the reader's point of view or perspective may differ than that of the author, narrator, or characters in a text. So if you were a group of teachers right now preparing to teach third grade reading, we would ask that you, for that standard, think about what is the knowledge a student needs to have in order to address that standard. And so you might say, you need to understand what point of view is. If you want to know the skills that are needed, you need to be able to read on grade level text, right? You need to be able to access the material that's presented to you. That's your piece of literature that's in front of you that you're teaching into. And then the understanding, you have to understand point of view to the point where you can not only know your own, but recognize where it might be different than somebody else's. And you can see that when you walk through that type of example, the difference in a teacher's understanding of the standard rather than simply reading the standard itself. And so that's some of the work that we've been doing with teachers so that they really get into the standard and understand what they're teaching. Additionally, we're doing extensive work on K-8 literacy, looking at updated research, reflecting on what that means for our practice, and then what the implication is for AIS and RTI.
So actually, let me pause there. That kind of gives you a sense of our first goal and the 3 objectives by program level. And again, you hear a lot of common themes, and that's by design because we take a very system approach to everything that we do. We know that if we have an issue at the high school, it's not a high school issue, it's a kindergarten issue. And we know that if we implement something in the kindergarten, it's going to be a senior benefit some point down the road. So I kind of use the 2 contrasts to point out when I say systems approach to things. And so you hear that piece of it as we go through. And so the goals are designed to build on each other, almost a spiraling effect and institutionalizing what we do as a system. So I'll pause. If there are any burning questions that you had related to the first goal, we can certainly address them. Otherwise, we'll just keep going and maybe address questions at the end. Is fair enough?
Yeah.
Mr. President?
So we're moving on to this next goal, an organizational, cultural, and environment. And there are some words within this objective that particularly resonate with me, and I think that you have heard them or referenced them throughout the evening. Every student feels connected. And so much of what we talked about thus far talks about student voice, talks about students being represented. And so in this particular slide, super excited to share with you some of the expansions and the initiatives that we have to help students feel connected in that way. We know how important relationships are, and so we want to make sure we craft those and support those relationships. Having said that, I was privy to a meeting where there were translators available. It was a parent evening through Aranjan They were trying to extend some services and offer things through Captain and some other community services. There were translators there that were available. We also know that so many of our documents that need to go home should be available in different languages, right? They should be available as well as translated and help to understand those documents and tools. So a lot of conversation there. So much so that it just happens almost organically. Dr. Robinson mentions institutionalized. I see so much more of that happening now with our everyday guidance tools, with our newsletters that go home, our communications to parents in that way, and our communications with our children. You see here also there's a title of a book, Reading to Make a Difference. So we started the year having that conversation about identity and about voice again, and we had a large initiative last year with trade books being brought into the classroom that would be representative of all our children. Again, that identity and inclusiveness. And it's one thing to have the books, it's another thing to know what to do with them and to have those courageous and consistent conversations. It's the dialogue that helps us evolve and move forward. So this was a professional text that was given to all of our teachers so that when they received these books that they had ordered, there was some great guidance questions that you can have for classroom conversations. There was a framework that you can use in there. There were suggestions for additional multicultural and inclusion kind of conversations and text. It turned out to be multi-purpose in that it was used in all of our buildings have literacy teams. Some of the literacy teams took that book on and did a communal read. That book is continuing to be referenced in classroom observations. That book is continuing to be used when we talk about Shensational and the anniversary of such. And some of the activities that we're suggesting is coming from that text. So really super proud. Although the vision was small, it grew, as does a lot of this work. And so I mentioned Shensational, and you know that our 10-year anniversary is coming up. And so many great activities planned across our district. Because it's an anniversary, there's been a lot of conversation at the committee about making it a week-long event, very much like you would have Spirit Week. So at the elementary level, I know that Carrigan and Orenda have taken the lead this year on some nice activities with potluck dinners coming up. Most recently, I saw the email go out. There was a huge turnout for that. I heard of this conversation about taking down a cafeteria wall where there's been sister schools and just having kids build those relationships and get to know each other at a time and a place where they don't normally mingle. So we're super excited about that. The other piece there too is we know that relationship building is so important, and so how do we get to know each other better? So there was the ENL teachers, the ELA teachers, and the library and media specialists have done extensive work on how can we craft some short-term projects that continue to help build those relationships, and we're hoping that students will take part in the authoring of I Am poems. There's a scaffolding, a sort of framework that you fill in. We're strongly encouraging our author in-house to take part in that process as well and create an I Am poem to share. So important that we continue to reach out to everyone.
Make a note of that.
Yes. And then lastly, the ENL program review you've heard about, but we know that Tasago volunteered to go through that program for a quality review this year as well. And as we talked about the social emotional piece, we know that there's been so much work done with our elementary counselors that helped speak to that. The Hanover article on equitable practices was shared. And just circling back to that conversation about every student feeling connected.
Good evening, Todd Jagny, the principal at Orenda Elementary. So for Objective 2, Mrs. Carmen has been meeting with the principals, the school counselors, and the school psychologists in order to review the New York State mental health rubric. And then we've taken that rubric and assessed our schools individually to ensure that we have the supports in place to make sure students are successful both socially and emotionally. Mrs. Carmen has also provided our elementary schools with professional development on childhood trauma and the negative effects it has on a child's academic successfulness at school, and the importance of embedding the social-emotional learning into our academic day. We work with Saratoga Center for the Family to provide wraparound services for the students who need it. For Objective 3, the elementary schools' emergency response teams have been working in tandem with the school resource officers in order to develop and ensure that we have the proper practices and protocols in place in order to make sure our environments are as safe as possible. Also, when we conduct our lockdown drills, we have been working in tandem with the school resource officers and other law enforcement, and these opportunities have provided us with valuable insight into each other's thinking in case of a real threat ever occurring. Thank you.
Thank you.
flip this here, because now I know exactly where to stand, so thank you for that. It's a special effort. I'm again Lisa Young. So again, we're working on our diverse and inclusive environments. Our work this fall at the middle school, just like everyone else, has been on organizational culture. And we are increasing the awareness of our students' needs, how we support our staff's understanding in order to improve achievement and positive outcomes by understanding, by working with staff in all of these areas. We are trying to improve our understanding of differences and how to ensure that all students feel safe and valued. Our professional development has been working very closely with having opportunities for staff to learn and understand our students' unique backgrounds, and how we as adults can foster the environment that is culturally responsive and celebrates that diversity. Some of the points in our slide talk about the fact that the social studies teachers have been working to read books on the role of racism in our society. For us as a special education department, we are constantly working on our students and how we can support them best in the classroom environments, how we appropriately place them, how we make sure that we are including them, how their profiles and their needs are met out in the classroom environment, and how everybody has that information. On the next slide, it continues to talk about the improvements that we are making as a team in the middle school. We are trying to address consistency throughout the school climate through the tri-building. Our middle school administration works very closely together this fall. We wanted to revise the consistency document in order to revise the policies, the procedures, and the rules throughout the tri-building. Some of those things include, like the cell phone usage, for example, making sure that that's the same in all three buildings so the students know that it's equal, so the students know what their expectations are. The students have a solid understanding of those expectations. The character education assemblies that we do kind of also talk about those things. They tie in because they talk about presentations on anti-bullying, resiliency, internet safety. Those are just a few of the things that we've talked about. And lastly, which I love, the Windows and Mirrors text that grade 8 is reading about, because that's a very nice culturally responsive text where the mirror is a story that reflects your own culture and helps you build your identity. A window is a resource that offers you a view into someone else's experience. So that's a really nice text that kind of reflects everything that we're working on as a whole as well. And Becky and I planned this. So.
No, we did not. Good evening. I'm Becky Carmen, Director of Policy and Community Development. So I'm going to be starting with continuing the middle school conversation, really talking about a whole child approach, which ensures that each student is healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged, sets the standard for comprehensive, sustainable school improvement, and provides for long-term student success. Our staff at Shen continue to ensure students have access to a rich curriculum, a healthy, supportive, and engaging environment. Specifically at the middle school, staff continue to provide students with opportunities to meet their academic needs, explore their college, career, and social emotional learning. Moving on to the next slide, the slide that I just mentioned, as well as this slide, highlight various initiatives our staff and students have been engaged in, which continue to increase opportunities for success. More importantly, we continue to learn why building relationships with our students is so critical. We know that positive relationships are the foundation for learning success.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bill Luke. I'm the assistant principal at Acadia Middle School. I'm going to be talking a little bit about school safety. And over the past couple of years in the middle school complex, we've really made a lot of progress in terms of tightening up and improving some different systems pertaining to school safety. Last year, we created a tri-building safety committee, which is comprised of administrators and teachers, support staff, our school resource officer, folks from district office. We did that because we wanted to make sure that safety procedures and protocols were consistent across all three schools. We're talking tonight about this year, but I wanted to share last year as a sort of a background to let you know that that tri-building safety committee was very successful in implementing a lot of new procedures, and it was met with lots of success and positive feedback. So we decided, how do we apply that to another system? This year we decided to move away from independent incident command teams in each building and move to more of a consolidated tri-building incident command. Again, like the tri-building, It's comprised of folks from across all 3 buildings. That group, new this year, is continuing to go through training. We have another tabletop actually scheduled for 2 weeks from today. We're going to test that system really for the first time in May when we conduct a mass evacuation over to High School West. On this slide and on my next slide, you're also going to see that SRO acronym scattered all over the place, and it's because we continue to rely on our school resource officer, Deputy Mike Regas, and all of his expertise and his training to make sure that we're really doing everything we can to be safe in our middle school. A key area of focus that we're focusing on this year is to conduct more scenario-based lockdown drills. So instead of the traditional, everybody knows it's coming, we're going into lockdown, you sit in a room, you wait for an administrator to unlock the door. What about a lockdown in the cafeteria? You know, in the middle school, we have 9 periods, and 4 of which we have hundreds and hundreds of students and staff in the cafeteria. So what does a lockdown look like in that example or in that case? So we did do a lockdown earlier this year in the cafeteria, and we're continuing to talk through the tri-building safety committees about how can we continue to do some more authentic scenario-based training. So our SRO has been a tremendous help in terms of all things school safety. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kristen Lennon McMahon. I am one of the assistant principals at the high school, and I'm in the High School West building with 9th grade. As we look towards encouraging our students to be more culturally competent community members, the high school actually is implementing 2, I guess you could call them activities, Day of Acceptance and Day of Dialogue. Day of Acceptance is a day that was created last year through our joint grade 9 environment committee. And the goal behind the day is to continue to make a larger community feel smaller and also provide activities where students respect what is different about them, but also respect what unites them as well. The first activity we did at the beginning of the year was called Popping the Bubbles of Intolerance. And then we're working on a second activity for March, which the emphasis is going to be on empathy. And what's unique about the second activity that we're doing as well, we have teachers working with the administrators to create it. We also have 2 students working with us to create it so that it's also student-friendly as well. We did that last year for the last activity. For Day of Dialogue, we had 2 full days this year as well. Lisa Kissinger and Rana Gastononi helped work on that day as well. And with that day, the goal was we had students, administrators, support staff, transportation members all come together and create a platform for student voices to be heard. And really what we did after that day of going through exercises, we went through and got feedback from students and adults, and today we actually met to review that feedback and look at a way to scale it up even more for next year. So stay tuned for that, as it's something that we're really looking forward to doing. In addition, with the VFW, after our Veterans Day event this year, some groups over at High School East worked together to do a food drive and then worked with the VFW. They actually picked them up and sent the food out for the students. And then for Regents exams, again, kudos to Lucas LeBaire, who really, fine-tuned things this year and worked very closely with Kathleen Drago and the counselors, as well as Sarah Trophy, to ensure that all students have access to opportunities for success as they're taking the Regents exams. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I apologize. So the seal of biliteracy, this was mentioned before by Mr. Agostinoni, but Sarah Trophy, as well with a lot of assistance from Maddie Campbell, who was our intern extraordinaire this year. We had approximately 200 students present and earn their endorsement that they are proficient in a second language. And then our Aspire programs as well, under the direction of Mike Gutschel and Kathleen Drago, team building activities to really provide that community for these students, PE nights, ice skating field trips together, and doing circles with their student support counselors, again, to really provide support, but also create this community and this feeling of teamwork. And then also utilizing, going back to our Regents Week, using some additional time for PD, as some mental health workshops were provided for our special education teachers and our teacher aides.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jackie Mahowski, and I am one of the class assistant principals over at High School East. Currently, I work with the 11th grade students. So I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about Objective 2 related to organizational culture and environment in terms of wellness of our students and staff, as well as de-stressing the school experience. And some of the things on this slide have already been discussed by Veronica Stononi and Lucas LeBaire, including the book study that happened at High School West through Google Classroom, as well as the podcast that is being sponsored by our high school partnership team each month to talk about those types of things. One of the things I would like to highlight is our work with referring students to the youth court in lieu of traditional suspensions and traditional out-of-school suspensions. So how that works is that a student, if they're coming to the class assistant principal's office with some sort of incident, we review the student's behavior record and what the incident might have been, and we can make a determination if we'd like to refer them to the youth court. And you do need parent permission, as they do have to sign a release form, so certainly you can't refer a student without that, but many parents I've found thus far this year have been really supportive of it. And then what happens is, instead of the student being suspended out of school, they go to a youth court session on a Thursday afternoon with a jury of their peers, and they might face an alternative consequence, including things like community service or a letter of apology, or having to do a little bit of research on educational health risks if it was a situation maybe related to vaping or something along those lines. One of the other great things that happens in relation to the youth court is that if the student as an offender then has to serve on the jury during a next youth court experience, so they get to see both sides of the process. And one of the positives related to that is we've actually picked up a couple students that wanted to serve on youth court after being an offender and then wanting to now be a part of it because it has been such an impactful experience for them. The second thing I want to touch upon is just some of our work in relation to mental health awareness. So one of the things that our Student Athletic Advisory Committee did as a service project was a mental health awareness week. They created a hashtag, Shatter the Stigma, and bought shirts for the administrative team, some staff members, as well as they gave out 250 free shirts to the first students that arrived at a basketball game that evening. So they really tried to raise awareness, and our student athletes got together, established some talking points about de-stressing the school environment, work-life balance, healthy relationships, and they took those talking points as juniors and seniors down to our lower level sports teams. They took them to our modified sports teams, our freshman sports teams, and they really tried to work to mentor the students based on those important topics and establish relationships with them. We also, during the halftime of that same basketball game where the free shirts were given out, honored our student support staff that work so hard each day educating our students on mental health, so our student support counselors. In relation also to our student support counselors, as Lucas mentioned previously, they're working to establish these classroom circles, these community circles within the classroom. And they started it with, and this is the work of Nikki Tabano and Sarah Madalena, our student support counselors. They've really been the ones that have been spearheading this. And they started it with our Aspire program, our alternative education program, as a smaller group. And what they do is they go into the classroom and they pose questions based on certain topics, based on empathy, based on healthy relationships, work-life balance, productive civil discourse, all of those types of things. And amongst those questions, they allow the students free opportunity to share anything that they would wish. So they pass around a talking stick and allow them the opportunity to share. Some students pass the opportunity and don't feel comfortable sharing, but what we are finding is that the more and more they go into the classrooms, the more and more comfortable students are getting within there and really sharing some things that are very eye-opening about their own experiences, but also getting to see that other kids in the classroom are feeling the same way that they are. So really normalizing the feelings for them, that they are not alone in some of the emotions or thoughts that they might be going through. So it started with our Aspire program, but Sarah and Nikki actually previously presented at one of our faculty meetings, and it's now expanding into some of our other classrooms as well. Nikki told me that one of the teachers is looking to tie it into her Catcher in the Rye curriculum, so we're really starting to see an expansion there. The last thing really that's going to be great, and this is going to happen in a couple weeks, is we're going to have a student in the 11th grade Aspire program run a community circle. So he actually is working with Nikki, establishing the questions, and then he himself is going to run it with the students. So we're really excited to see where this is going to progress forward. Thank you.
again, that didn't take long. So as student safety is always at the forefront of our minds, and it's our number one priority, we continue to collaborate with outside law enforcement agencies as well as our school resource officers to really help us because they have, the knowledge that we need. So with that said, we have gone through some incident command training at the high school again this year to really review our procedures and in a way give the administrators and our teams a tune-up so that we know what to do in the event of an emergency. We also implemented a lockdown during passing time to see, what our systems would be like in that type of a situation, and we learned a great deal from that. There were some upgrades made to the high school east entrance as it continues to continue to have upgrades to make that location a safer location for visitors to come and go. And then we also implemented district-wide sign-in procedures for both buildings. And then threat assessment training was provided for our counselors, psychologists, and our student support counselors so that students who are in a mental health crisis are assessed properly and then also receive additional supports that they need thereafter.
Our focus on equity is unwavering and comprehensive, including some of the work that has been going on recently through Policy Review Committee, working to add a very bold declarative statement in front of several instructional policies. As you know, our Board of Education policies, you know this better than anyone, start with the Board of Education and then some sort of adjective, verb, adverb. Well, the phrase that we are recommending be put on a lot of instructional policies, and then we'll probably venture out into other areas as well. The Board of Education unequivocally avows that all students deserve equity and opportunities and outcomes by ... A very powerful statement that speaks to the fact that we are committed to equity across the board, and we start from that frame with the idea that this education that we provide in Shenendehowa is for all students, and we are really committed to that. Also talking about the idea that we're looking at data by subgroups. You've heard a lot about that. We have resources available for teachers. Lisa Kissinger, Anna Sugarman, and I'm sure many others have contributed to an Inside Shen page, an internal web page where there are resources at teachers' fingertips and administrators' fingertips to help them as we explore what does it mean to be culturally responsive? What are some things that we should be considering while we're designing our lessons? It extends to the addition of a girls' golf team this year. The idea that we now have a pep band for students to engage in athletic events that would not maybe otherwise have been at our athletic events, and the creation of the special education PTA.
So as a system, as Dr. Wood was talking about with the equity, we also continue to educate staff and students about social emotional learning, what it is, and what the social emotional learning competencies are. In addition, we continue to raise awareness of mental health wellness, working to decrease the stigma and ensure our students and staff needs are being met to ultimately ensure success for all. Social emotional learning and mental health wellness resources are listed on Inside Shen and the district's website for everyone to access. We communicate those resources out on a regular basis. In addition, we also have the Bountiful Backpack Program, which is also a way in which we meet students' needs, because we know if the basic needs aren't met of our students, the ability to learn doesn't happen, and it makes it very difficult for teachers to teach. On the next slide, the focus on school safety is constantly on the forefront. The district continues to look at how we can enhance our safety practices by educating, empowering, and engaging our staff, our students, and our community in this process. Shen strategically uses a four-pronged approach to safety and security. We're doing safety audits. We've done safety audits of all the buildings at the beginning of this year. We have personnel-based security. We are looking, we have visitor passes, or visitor badges now and lanyards. We have physical access control mechanisms and other technology-based security tactics, and regular trainings and drills for staff and students with law enforcement and emergency responders.
Yeah. Good. We're shifting gears to personnel. Good.
All right, good evening, everyone.
My name is Malik Jones. I'm the principal of Paragon Elementary School. In regards to personnel and professionalism, I want to start with a statement that you already know. We have an amazing staff here at Shen, and we have to attribute a lot of that to our system and process that we have for bringing folk into our district. Our recruiting and hiring process is a very well-structured and organized one. Now, with that being said, we're still always looking for ways to strengthen the process and make it more efficient. And one of the ways we're doing that is through participation on the district hiring and recruitment committee. This committee provides us principals as well as district personnel an opportunity to come together with our very diverse perspectives and review the different components of the hiring process and have really robust conversations about ways in which that we can really try to strengthen and make it more equitable to ensure that we continue to bring in those great individuals in whom we have in our district now. What we're noticing is this idea of ensuring that there's diverse representation within the hiring components of what we do is really trickling its way down to the elementary schools. Many of the elementary principals, we are now really keeping a keen eye open to figure out ways to convene diverse faculty members on our particular hiring committees, because the idea behind that is to identify diverse qualified candidates, we deem it imperative to have diverse representation at the committee level. That is very, very important, and we have that within our respective school buildings. Teacher orientation, another important component of our hiring process here is a teaching onboarding component. Elementary principals identified a need many, many moons ago that new teachers starting to fall needed to have a better understanding exposure to the curriculum in which they would be teaching in the fall. So as a result of that, modifications were made to the format of our new teacher onboarding process to ensure that all new teachers were exposed to the curriculum, and not only exposed to the curriculum, but they were put in a place where they really understood how to access the different curriculum resources to ensure that they can hit the ground running in September, but also for us to make sure that we were providing them the best opportunity to achieve early and sustained success.
Okay, so the technical aspect of this slide is that we rolled out the profile of a Shen employee at Superintendent Conference Day, and we included it in our subfolders, trying to hit a few more people so they understand some of those expectations. And we are continually going through training. Okay, so our lab aides are getting trained. We have staff and administrators continually getting trained on everything from e-doctrina and reading instruction. I think the bigger thing with this slide is the two pictures, because this is what the profile of a Shen employee is all about. When you see Malik up there getting chosen by a student to learn how to play the cello, and when you see teachers that are willing to get sticky scooping out ice cream, and that's what it's all about. So I think that the big thing with that slide is taking a look at those pictures and understanding that we're actually doing a little bit more than just the typical. And that's, I think, what the kids always remember. The next slide is a little bit more meatier. The big thing right now is if you want to have some fun, invite 10 educators at elementary and tell them to talk about reading. And you will have a very enlightening conversation and maybe a few fireworks here and there. Reading is always a hot topic. So under Dr. Wood's leadership, she has taken on the deep task of forming a committee and looking at literacy in the district. And one of the big things that they're looking at is, instead of pegging into a program, is looking at training. And this is a big shift. So it's actually educating the educator a little bit more about reading. And the big thing you're going to hear about is this new science of reading. So one of the things that's happening is we have teachers across the district and administrators at the elementary level getting trained on this new science of reading. And just what that actually involves. And Armin Spoelstra is doing a lot of that training. I know she's gone to a lot of professional development. She's kind of our turnkeyer in the district, so she's helping out a great deal with that. So then the other thing along with that is we had new science kits put into place, and Michelle worked very closely, Michelle Gabri-Huba, with BOCES, so the teachers are getting trained. They're going directly to BOCES to get that training. The kits are much more complicated. It's a big shift for elementary with that curriculum shift and how they approach science. So thanks to Michelle for that. And I'm not sure if you heard this, but CODA and TASAGO are going through an E&L voluntary review. So just know that we are going through that now. So thank you.
Hello again. I'm going to talk about the E&M quality. No, I'm just kidding. It was on there, actually, scratched it off. But I don't know if it's a product of my age or the fact that maybe fewer people are really entering into the field of education, but recruiting, hiring, retaining is seeming to become more and more difficult as my career extends. We're very fortunate at the middle school to have 2 awesome new assistant principals over the last 2 years. We've worked informally with them to mentor them and bring them along and get them used to the way we operate everything here at Shenendehowa. And while we're still working on a formal mentor program at the administrative level, it's hopefully leading to some best practices and things that we can share with them as well. One of the things I've done a lot of over the last few years is, as it seems as the numbers kind of thin out across certain content areas, we've sort of tried to cast a wider net. One of the things we've used is a lot of video screening interviews, where normally we can screen about up to maybe, I'd say, 15 or 16 candidates and then bring in maybe 6 to 8 for interviews. We're trying to get up into the range of maybe the 20s where we can get some extra people just to see what we have. So that's something that we've been using. I've used it a lot with Carrie Peverly and our math people, and Rose Bear in terms of our tech people, where you're really finding that the 3 images up there are 3 of our great hires from this year. 2 technology teachers in 1 year. That's a feat in itself, just to find technology teachers, let alone 2 quality and an outstanding science teacher, just to name a few. So, lots to do there and a lot of work to do, and I think we're working on that and becoming successful. So, that's right, I skipped. I'm right back.
He's right back, so you can stay with me if you want to. This piece is really about something that I think all 6 administrators, we really push with our folks, is to be connected with our students. We want our students to be connected with one another, but we absolutely want our adults to be connected. And the slides we chose here, all 3 schools have very, very strong mentor programs that we're really proud of. And that's not even just administrators and teachers being involved with mentoring. We have aides, we have monitors, and we have a custodian that's involved with our mentor program. And that's huge. And I don't care who the kid connects with, we love them to be connected to the school and want to participate in a program like that. So that's super exciting. You see up in there, our music department, they're wonderful about connecting. They didn't need to come in before the holidays and play with the students. They're outstanding, and they do a tremendous amount of things. And I wish I had more room for slides for the whole middle school, but that's just one. And then another one that we have up there, and that was a Start with Hello campaign. That was one singular counselor saw this was part of the Sandy Hook Promise, and we partnered with the physical education with Chris through the athletic department, and we said, hey, what about if we get all of our fall sports kids to come in? They came in on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each team was split up when they came in, and they greeted the kids. And one of the main things they said, it was an action to promote connectiveness and inclusiveness. So every kid was greeted with a hello, hello, with a high five. And what kind of came from that was, wow, that was great because we included all of our fall athletes, but what about our students in the drama club? And what about our students, of course, spring athletes, and so on. So, of course, it's grown, and now will take place again in the spring, and we'll try to include more student groups. So it's just all about those ways, and we're just really proud of our staff for making those connections and finding ways for the kids to make connections as well. Sean, you're back on.
Trying to steal Robin's thunder. But one of the things that we continue to do at the middle school is really to maximize our internal expertise. I'm going to speak sort of to what CODA has done this year, and Guana and Acadia have done something similar. one of the things we try to do is address two of the first goal areas, the engaged classroom and the culturally responsive classroom, and we're creating a thing called the Coda Cookbook, which is really just a compilation of all of our best practices. We had a work session today. It was really cool. On the Google Doc, as all the teachers were working, I could sit there and watch some of the really neat. There are just so many engaging pieces of technology. There are so many ways to address people's cultures in the classroom, and so far it's been a wonderful experience. I'm really excited to see how it plays through, as I'm sure the other administrators are. And then we're going to share these out at the end of the year and maybe play them out at some of the staff meetings, as we always do. We try to have best practice shown at almost every, or demonstrated at each staff meeting as well. As Robin mentioned earlier with the alt scheduling committee, I think that was a great way to use our internal expertise. We brought a great group of people together who did a ton of work, who really had expertise in all areas. Multiple districts had been through the transition from different schedules, myself included. So for them to be able to be up and speak to their colleagues like they did was outstanding. And one of the final things that I'm not going to go back to the annual quality review, but over the summer, our specialized reading teachers did do a ton of work with the AAs from the middle school, Lisa and Armin from the elementary school, really trying to develop our phonemic awareness program. And like I said earlier, as we had developed all of the criteria, the multiple data points to see who goes in there. But, you know, that's something that we did, and we're continuing to monitor that at this point. Some of our preliminary data is showing some really solid growth, and we hope that that continues, and we can see if that translates into some other subject areas, which is always the most difficult piece. We usually can show growth within our programs, but getting that growth to transfer into the social studies classroom, for example, is very difficult to measure. But that's where we're headed, and those are some of the highlights from the middle school. Thank you.
Well, again, we talked about a lot about hiring the best qualified candidates. I will add to that that we do implicit bias training for all of our committees. There's a wonderful training that Dr. Wood put together that all of our teachers, all our administrators watch before we do any interviewing. It's a comprehensive review of implicit bias, and you learn something new. I've seen it probably 500 times now, and every time you see it, you pick up something new, you reflect a little different on it. It's a really important part of our hiring process. It was mentioned we have one of our admin interns here. We have this program where we have interns coming into us from within. We're growing our own leaders, so we are fortunate enough to have two phenomenal interns this year. Last year we had an intern who actually is now hired as one of our two. I know the middle school mentioned they have two awesome new assistant principals. We have the same in the high school. One of them interned with us last year and then was hired this year. So it's nice to be able to grow your own leaders from within when that's able to be done. And when I'll say Anna Sugarman and the new teacher mentor program is phenomenal. And just to go beyond that, really it's the programs we have, but it's a culture of mentoring we have here at Shen. So there's a lot of informal mentoring that happens just because of the culture. Having gone through it just 3 years ago, you feel that. So that happens outside of the formal things we put together. I'll mention the CASDA Principals Board I'm fortunate enough to be part of with Malik Jones is on it, and Greg Pace, actually the co-chair of the CASDA Principal Board with administrative principals from the greater capital region. And part of that focus is doing the work of recruiting new folks to the principalship or to administration, because we know as it's getting harder and harder to hire qualified teachers, that then correlates to being able to hire qualified administrators. And Dr. Robinson has volunteered or let us bring that to our school. So in May, we're hosting a new assistant principal forum where we'll be talking about leadership, and that program also takes place in other schools throughout the year. So that's part of the work that we're doing at the high school.
So the key word of this second objective is really relationships. And just as I mentioned earlier, we feel that it's important for students to have a strong connection to their school community through the programs and activities that they participate in. It's also very important that they have a connection to their schools through a relationship with their peers and also with the adults, of course, that they interact with every day. So these are just a couple of examples of ways that we've worked to try to accomplish that. The first thing is going out of our way to make sure that we recognize and reward staff members who are going above and beyond to do this type of work. So we've tried to, use some incentives and some awards to publicly recognize some of the folks that have done work above and beyond their normal expectations to build connections with kids. And luckily, we have a lot of great people at the high school level that are doing that type of work. It was mentioned earlier, but it very much fits here as a wonderful example of this type of relationship building, and that's the Day of Dialogue. Mr. Agostinoni, Mrs. Lennon-McMahon, and Mrs. Kissinger worked very hard to carry out those 2 full-day events. And that really was one of the foundations of those events, laying the groundwork for continued bridge building between the adults and the kids in our buildings at the high school level. Finally, one that I think is also very important is we're working to try to implement new training and new conversations with our high school monitor staff so that they're better prepared to build relationships with students in the building through their interactions. You know, our monitors are some of the first people that our students see when they walk into our building. They're some of the last people they see before they leave for the day and get on the bus. And we want to make sure that our folks who are in those positions have the skills and the ability and recognize the value of proactively building those relationships so that when the time comes to handle a stressful situation or a problem, they've already established a relationship with some of the kids in the building. And again, with a building with our volume and our size of students, it seems difficult, but when you put that work in on a daily basis, day after day, just to say hello and get to know a kid's name and find out a little bit what they're about, that really can pay off in big gains down the road. So those are just a few examples, but again, a focus on trying to make sure our kids see that there's folks that care about them and want to make a relationship with them outside of just typical instruction. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Catherine Guthrie. I'm the Academic Administrator for Special Education at the high school. I want to echo with what Malik said is we have a really great staff. And one of the greatest resources we have here at Shen is our knowledge capacity from our staff. We are capitalizing on that at the high school level by allowing our staff to present at our staff meetings. All of the great things that you've heard about tonight, a lot of our teachers and our staff are leading those things. They have the knowledge and expertise of those things. So we provide faculty meeting time for them to share out to their colleagues and collaborate with their colleagues. We're also in special education. We use our department meeting time for those opportunities. We've talked a lot about the alt scheduling. So we're using a lot of our staff to move that forward by collaborating with their peers and providing the professional development that they need to be successful.
Good evening. As you can see from the slide, Work for Shen is a collaborative effort of all the folks in this room to recruit, hire, and retain the best employees instructionally and our support staff. And in that, I just want to give you a couple, some data points. This year, we have interviewed and recommended for hiring, and you've supported 41 probationary teachers, 7 administrators, which is probably a record in 1 year, and 79 support staff. So many folks have come into the environment of the workplace culture, and on the other end, we have many folks that have worked here 25 years or plus. And when I am here presenting retirements, you also see that we have folks that have been here 38 years. So there is tremendous engagement, there's tremendous loyalty to the district, and I appreciate the folks that presented on behalf of, because it's not just the Office of Human Resources, as I said, it's a collaborative effort to have the best folks in front of us.
Good evening, Ken McDermott, Director of Technology for the district. Just a couple points that I'd like to make. You heard Dr. Robinson talk about the articulation of the goals being consistent across all departments in the district, and that's kind of one of the themes that I'd like to focus on with this slide, as well as how much we know that students need to feel safe, and they need to be engaged. So to that end, there's many things that the district has done to focus on creating meaningful relationships with kids and to develop to promote that idea of engagement. It starts with the onboarding process, and HR where they go over the district goals and the profiles of the Shenendehowa employee. There's ongoing training opportunities. We put a lot of effort into doing training for non-instructional staff, as I would refer to them, aides, monitors, bus drivers, and things like that on Superintendent's Conference Day to build those skills of how to engage a kid, how to make them feel comfortable and appreciated throughout the day. We've also done several workshops on digital citizenship with the employees. Now that we've transitioned to Chromebooks, it's important that everybody has a good understanding of that. And then, call out some efforts that transportation has done. They not only have talked about doing the training for how to engage students and create those relationships, but they've actually made that part of their evaluation. So that's part of their checklist. With respect to creating opportunities for kids, we've been working with the students with the shed, as it's referred to. They've branded themselves as a shed. It's a student help desk. We have one in High School West and High School East. There's roughly 70 students involved in the shed. We have 2 CEIP interns that they are the shed managers. We have one first semester, one second semester. So far this year, they've already had over 6,000 visits to the shed. About 75% of those are dealing with students that didn't charge their Chromebooks. But the balance of that, they do things like replacing broken screens, fixing keyboards, touchpad. They fix Wi-Fi problems and things like that. Just a great way to engage the students and provide an opportunity and an internship experience for them. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Al Karam, Director of Transportation. So tonight you've heard several times mentioned about professional development. Professional development is, in my estimation, the key to professional, efficient, safe, and caring staff. The ongoing professional learning for support staff and new administration is consistent with the professional learning plan and the district goals. I can tell you that the great job that this district is doing in terms of professional development has reached outside the district boundaries. I was recently visited from a colleague out at TSD BOCES who came here specifically to talk about the things we're doing specifically in transportation and overcoming some transportation-related issues. And part of that discussion really centered on professional development. And the last thing I will say that Shen is only a handful of school districts across the state that provides more than the bare minimum, which is 2 safety meetings for their transportation staff per year. This district does 6. So my hat is off to the board and to the district administration for supporting professional development.
All right, I'm back up for the next 2 slides regarding fiscal responsibility. We began making valiant attempts to involve staff in the equitable distribution of resources within our respective schools at the elementary level. Many of us are working with our building level teams to identify various resources to enhance and maximize the learning environment and learning outcomes for students. In addition to that, we also begin conducting what we call building level walkthroughs. And the walkthroughs serve as a way for us to engage staff and really solicit from them ideas on how and ways in which we can continue to improve our learning environment for all of our students. Let's go to the next slide. Elementary principals have collaborated with IMS and Ken McDermott, thank you, Ken, in the development of the budget forms and the TOP process for next year. We engage IMS in some very, very healthy and robust conversations about which technological resources would benefit our students the most and help us continue to enhance the learning experience for each of our students. Additionally, we wanted to ensure that staff were involved in the TOP process as well. And what we did was we had teachers meet with their grade level teams and begin having conversations with each other about different resources they feel if we were able to incorporate and acquire within our own buildings, it will continue to move the needle forward for academic and student overall achievement. And this is really exciting because, this process has once upon a time been one that's kind of been done in isolation by administration. So the fact that we are able to do that in conjunction with our internal stakeholders, our teachers, our staff, is very, 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 very exciting. Thank you.
Not that quick, Todd. You're not up there.
So at the elementary level, we've allocated funds towards the New York State Education Initiative of developing purposeful play in our kindergarten classrooms. And the theory behind purposeful play is that the students are active learners in their education by being either autonomously, try to use a good word, right? And collaboratively involved in exploring their materials in that learning environment.
Good evening, I'm Stacy Vadney. I'm the assistant principal at Coda Middle School. As a tri-building administrative team, we are continuously looking at our fiscal responsibility to our students, parents, taxpayers. And as we go through that process, we are always looking what we can sustain and what we currently have in our building, what resources we could add that will all look to aim at our forefront question: what can we do to always foster our students and all our students' social, emotional, and cognitive development? So that's what we're always striving to do when we have this conversation about objective one of the fiscal responsibility. The two that I could speak of that I've seen directly and been quite impressed with is the Future Ready grant and how it's definitely assisted with our furniture options in our classrooms, especially with the flexible seating options. It just really has assisted with the instruction process. Talking to the students, they love it. They love that they can come in. It's not that sterile, rigid looking classroom anymore. It allows for transition between instruction from direct to group, and it's not quiet. It's not, it's not, loud, noisy. So it happens very efficiently, so instruction time is optimized for the students.
Last time, I swear. So one of the biggest things that I saw when I was looking at this goal was the transition in the Gmail, and I was kind of surprised nobody brought it up because I don't lose sleep over a lot of things. But I remember over the December break, lots of concern about that. And while there were certainly some growing pains, there's no question about that. I got to give a huge shout out to Brian Gidley and Ken and the whole IMS team and the lead teachers, because really what they did in that situation, at least I felt from our middle school seats, is they put all of the tools and so many pieces of instruction out in front of us that we were able to get ahead of it with our staff. There's the people who are just going to wait and go for it, rip the Band-Aid off the last day, and there's the planners who really wanted to get out in front of it. So I thought that was a really huge operational change for us this year, and one that I think could have been not so great. So kudos to those people who have really made that be successful. One of the things we're continuously doing at the middle school is looking at our AIS and our supports to our non-students with disabilities. That is primarily AIS in our structured study hall. We've looked at all sorts of things. This year, one of the things we are looking at, and again, we go back out to the teachers and see what they have to say about it. And one of the teachers brought up, well, it's a little bit strange when I have a mix of kids in my 7th period class. 8 of them have already had class, and 4 of them hadn't. And how do I do that? Because I don't know. I can't really pre-teach. I can't really reteach. But I can work on skills, etc. So one of the things we're looking at is it possible so that we can have the classes one way or another so that they can either reteach or pre-teach? But little anecdotal information like that really makes you think when you're doing the scheduling and how you're doing that. And I can speak for CODA. We service over 150 kids for Math AIS alone, and probably a little bit over 100 for English AIS, not even mentioning the 50 or so for reading, and probably about 75 for our structured study hall. So those are programs where those kids are You really need those supports, and they're very effective. One of the other things that we did with our Title I funds this year is we're always trying to utilize and maximize those Title I funds. We created an after-school homework program for those students. We sort of call them the 9 to 3:30 kids, maybe don't have the same support in terms of the homework support at home. And we worked that through our structured study hall aides. They had already have the connections with those kids who might be a little disaffected, maybe not completing the work at the rate that you might want. And it's so far been very successful, getting a lot more homework completion and keeping kids on task so that they can complete their assignments and they're more willing to participate in class. And again, so we're reaching them. And finally, one of the things, I'm sure we're all used to these GAT shields. We're working with IMS a lot and making sure that our students are using the technology appropriately. It's really nice to be able to talk to a parent and say, yeah, well, this is what happened, and they're like, oh, really? It does that? So it's nice for our families to know how that works. Again, a load of work on IMS, but I congratulate them and I thank them for all that they do there, because I think it's a really good process for our students to keep them safe. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Van Gelder. I'm the assistant principal at Gowanna Middle School. Part of fiscal responsibility is maximizing what we do with our dollars. We are very lucky through the Arts and Ed program. We have fabulous PTA in all 3 of the middle schools. We take that funding and we work with BOCES in the Arts and Ed program. We maximize as much as we can get out of it. Each grade level in the middle school has an opening character education. It has to do with internet safety, doing that digital footprint correctly. We do outside funding for those for commercial. And then this year, Oliver had sent some emails. We latched onto it, and we have the New York State Department of Justice is sending a crew to do internet safety. They're going to gauge it for the 6th graders with a little bit of whitewash, and then they're going to do the 7th and 8th graders, and it's going to be some real straightforward, this is what happens when you're not responsible with that. Arts and Ed, we work with bringing in authors. Very cool stuff has occurred. Last year we brought in, before he retired, Gordon Corman, who the students just are over the moon for, and then they filled the library with him on one night with the Clifton Park Half Moon Library. This year we had returning Rob Bouillet, who is an author for the 6th grade, who just released a paperback, so the kids are crazy about it. When I was a young teacher, we brought a lady here who I thought was just ancient at the time. Her name is Johanna Rees, a Holocaust survivor. And now the kids have read her book for about 28 years. When she comes back to us this year, she will be 88 years old. And we've decided to do a night at the Clifton Park Half Moon Library with her as well. A very cool thing has started to occur. Parents who, when they were Shenendehowa students, got her book and had it signed, are sending it back in with their students to have it re-signed with their own kids. So it's a very cool thing.
Do you know when that is? When she's going to be coming?
She will be here the week of April 27 till May 1 in the library on the 29th. We do some fun things as well with the Arts and Ed. We decided that we needed a day of fun after Halloween, and so we had Capitol Repertory Theater come in for all the 6th graders and do Cinderella. Cinderella was Asian, Prince Charming was African American, and the fairy godmother, who knew what he was. But the kids loved it, they sang, they enjoyed it thoroughly. Another collaboration is for the backpack program. We realized that the Thanksgiving week was going to be a long time that the kids wouldn't have their food program. Hannaford heard, and one of our staff members contacted them. They sent 23 Thanksgiving turkeys over, and then the different community groups heard about it. The next thing we knew, we had boxes of food to go to all the families for Thanksgiving week. If they couldn't come get them, then people volunteered to deliver them. So good stuff going on.
Hello, Sarah Chaffee, Academic Administrator for ENL and World Languages. I think you know that. So at the high school, at High School West, we're looking to reconfigure space. to consolidate counselors, psychologists, Jess Muscanel, who's from the Saratoga County Center for the Family, and our student support counselor, Doreen Bazil, into one space, which we would call the Student Support Center. And then this would allow for better communication among adults who are supporting our ninth grade students. And that would mean that would all be moved into what is now the main office, and the main office would be moved into what is now the counseling center at West. Also at the high school, Lucas Levere has overseen the rollout of a portal that allows for payment for AP exams online. And this is a pretty solid savings in manpower hours. It means not having to process checks and cash. It's easier for parents. And it also allows for live tracking of the payments. You already heard how the English department is creating a process to improve the management of their texts. And the one last thing that I'm going to talk to you about tonight is, you know that there's a larger building process or larger building project in process at the high school, at High School East. And we're also looking to update classrooms within the context of our current budget. So we're looking at fresh coats of paint, accent walls to warm up the space, new molding, standardized whiteboards. If you happen to be in High School East, stop in and look at room 101. Ron showed me a picture of it earlier tonight, and it beats HGTV any day. I would recommend you stop in and take a look at it. It looks awesome. Thanks.
Hello again. So I'm going to talk in relation to Objective 2 of meeting the evolving needs of students and staff. So Sean already previously discussed the shift to the Google platform at the middle school. So at the high school, we had a very similar experience in terms of many successes, but also, of course, as always, challenges when you're rolling out something new. But we found that in our experience, most people have been really willing to shift over to the Google and have been very interested in centralizing their calendars as an administrative team. We've worked to all share our calendars with each other so that we're all aware of where we are at given times if needed or anything along those lines, as well as working with our counselors and our teachers and our support staff to really make sure that we're centralizing all of our conference areas and using Google to create those calendar invites so that everybody's aware of what's going on and on the same platform. Additionally, Ken also mentioned our student help desk, our totally student-run help desk in which they manage checking in students, handing out the loaners, charging the Chromebooks, and the repairs. Another piece related to this, though, is related to the repairs in that students are doing all of the labor for it. So it really helps to keep costs down when a student has a broken screen or needs a new keyboard or something along those lines, because they simply just, as a student and parent in the district, have to pay for the part and not necessarily the labor because those students are working together to do that. Additionally, whenever we do have a student that is charged with some sort of Chromebook fee, Lucas Levere goes through all of them and then sends a spreadsheet to all the class assistant principals with students at that time that have a fee outstanding, and we have conversations with those students. So we call them into the office and we try to discuss with them ultimately what did happen with their Chromebook. Was it an incidental error, or was it something where they closed the pen on the screen, which I hear quite often, or they stepped on it by accident or threw their backpack, in order to determine if that student should be responsible for the fee or if it's something that they could be exempted from based on something that was not necessarily their fault in relation to their Chromebook management. So it always helps to keep costs down for students and parents alike. Thank you.
So as we prepare, and really kudos to the board for leveraging the capital improvement process and all the benefits that come along with that, and having done that for a number of years now. As we prepare for another one at the high school, you're aware of being fiscally responsible through that process, but something you might not see is on the other end of that as we prepare to make some shifts in the high school, because we're renovating science rooms in a tech area, and we're still teaching those classes, so people have to move. Working with Barb Saliker and Steve West to do it in the most fiscal responsible way. Where do we move folks? Where do we have plumbing? Where do we have to put a sink? And do it in a way that makes the most sense for students and their achievement first, and then in a way that's fiscally responsible. So that process has taken place. So two things with capital projects. One that probably happens at this level here, and then on the other end, how we prepare for that for, as Chris Cullen will say, short-term pain,
long-term gain as we're getting ready for that at the high school. And the last thing we put up there is, we have a number of scholarships. I think we sent stuff out today regarding scholarships, and we continue to manage those and try to get them to the largest group of students we can to make sure they're able to access those scholarships as they leave us.
Good evening. Now we're moving on to sort of the non-instructional side of the house. How do we invest our resources to ensure the best experience for kids? And similar to the instructional side of the house, the non-instructional side of the house is starting to look at data in order to determine what is the best use of resources. One of the things that has made the news quite a lot lately is all of the ESSA requirements, and this year we reported proactively for the 19-20 budget and also retroactively for the 18-19 actual expenditures. In fact, the deadline for the last one is this weekend, so we're working diligently to try to get that information together. And it's always good to look at information in different ways. So it'll be interesting to see what kinds of things we can learn from that data. The work order system that we have in place has been good to alert us to the things that we need to do operationally, things that are broken, things that need immediate attention, helps us track what things are requiring a lot of our resources to fix. But really the best way to reduce some of those work orders is to get on a preventive maintenance schedule. I'm happy to say Steve West has really taken hold of that idea and started dropping in a lot of information into our work order system so that we can get on preventive maintenance schedules and hopefully prevent a lot of these things from breaking and going without, heat for a couple of hours or what have you. We've done a lot of work with our internal auditors to look at various areas. One of the things that we looked at this year was the food service inventory system and controls. A lot of doors, a lot of keys, a lot of locks. They're not always locked all day or such that people can't access it unnoticed, so we're working a lot on trying to secure those areas more timely and more securely. And the IT assets, similar to some of the instructional materials, we're now using the asset tracking system to monitor who's being assigned what resources, what computers, what Chromebooks, and whether we get them back, if ones go missing. So a little different than our regular inventory system. This really tracks the assigned resources, if you will, to determine their path, so to speak. Moving on with some of the more non-instructional services. Food service invested a fair amount of money this year in the cash registers. Not only does it update the software that they're utilizing, but it also gets the kids through faster. So there's less wait time for our students and more time to do other more productive things. We spend a lot of time with negotiations, investing a lot of time and resources in settling those contracts, but also making sure they're sustainable over time. As you recall, salaries and benefits amount to about 80% of our budget, so our contracts are really important to our long-term well-being as a school district. Internal audit also looked at our leave of absence process this year. We actually requested that our internal auditors look at this area. We knew that we needed some bolstering in that area, and having an independent review helped us kind of focus our efforts, but there are so many moving pieces and departments that are impacted by the leave of absence. We're still working on it and making progress, but we're finding it's taken quite a lot of our time and putting our heads together, but we will come out ahead in the end there. Um, Transition to Gmail, as was said previously, and last but not least, the group effort, if you will, on snow removal. We had the opportunity earlier this year when we had a snow day to kind of monitor our processes and how our departments work together, or lack thereof, not for lack of trying, but just what worked a couple of years ago doesn't work any longer. For example, transportation now has the scraper system that scrapes the snow off the top of the buses. What we didn't anticipate is how does that snow get moved away so you can drive the next bus through without taking resources away from the grounds crew, who really needs to get out there and plow the driveways and the parking lots. So we had all of the great minds around the table coming up with good solutions, and I think we came up with some pretty good progress there. So we have great departments and great people that work together.
Hi, I'm Steve West, the Director of Facilities. Finish up with fiscal responsibility. Budget development website is there for our community to use as a resource. Some of the information that they might find there is important timelines that we use for the budgetary process, as well as dates for the public hearings and annual vote dates. The bid process, it says 21 bids. It's actually 22 completed at this point. There's 27 out there currently. We use this to try to maximize every dollar we have, trying to make sure that we get best pricing at the best value for the work that we need to get done. One example is the boiler and hot water heater bid that we put out this year. Just by making a few minor tweaks to that, along with the purchasing department, we were able to save some money on the contract for the next 3 years, over $10,000. Typically, there's about 40 that we do annually throughout the course of the year. Electronic workflow and storage of data. Those bids are in at this point, and I believe there's a committee that's actually going through that to finalize which way to go. Essentially, it's going to provide for a lot less paper in everybody's offices, and potentially make the day-to-day opportunities to be much more efficient. I look forward to that. High School West sound system, for anyone who sat through that, occasionally has some issues with it. It's in dire need of replacement. That's one of the competitive bids that we just completed. We're hoping to start work on that in the next couple of weeks to a month, once we get the vendor approved and parts ordered. One of the great things about that process going forward is that music teachers are now going to have the capability to record their students and lessons, play it back immediately for a teachable moment. And the Future Ready grants, which Stacy Vadney already touched upon, is essentially an in-house grant process that allows our teachers to forward think, come up with some new creative ways to educate our students moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all our presenters, and I want to say thanks to the board. So tonight, other than the one business item, this was designed to only have this item, so we could, one, so it's not too long, two, but also give it the justified time to effectively go through these things. And as you sit there, again, you hear some commonalities, what sound like redundancies, but often I say that sometimes it's not what you see on the surface. It's all this other stuff behind that really makes the surface appealing to the end user, so to speak. And so we always talk about, what's the forward facing, but more importantly, what's the work that's taken behind. And a lot of these things, so we're here for 2 hours, but you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of hours of work put into to display to you as a board. And I want to wrap my comments up with that piece of it, that At the end of the day, Mr. DeLallo at our last board meeting, and I appreciate his compliment to myself and Mrs. Chase about the work that we have done from a fiscal responsibility perspective as we sit here in this budget season. And I thought about Gary's comment, and I thought about also my longevity here at Shen. And I thought that, what's the combination of those things? And the commonality is that at the end of the day, successful leaders are people who have a great sense of humility, recognizing that at the end of the day, we can't do it on our own, and it's the effectiveness of the team that matters. And so I want to say kudos to all the folks who are sitting in the audience, knowing that, yes, we have our ups and downs, we have our moments where we poke holes, but I always say to folks that, we have a responsibility to each other to interrogate each other's thinking, to have those crucial conversations, and crucial conversation meaning important conversation, because we have to know once we make a decision, we have to have a high degree of confidence that based upon all the information we had, that was the best decision we made. And also then be willing to realize that we can learn from whatever that implementation brings and make it better. So leadership matters, and it's not about title. It's about attitude that we bring every day to the table, to asking the question, what can I do today to add value to the organization? And as long as we have that mentality as a system, we'll continue to thrive. We're not here about surviving. We're here about thriving as a system for our students. And that's something that we all have to take that personally and feel that personally within our, when we say that, there has to be something that there's a meaning for you, because that's the most important thing. And we're so privileged to be in a profession that every day, every decision that we make not only impacts the student we have now, but truly generations to come. Because if we turn kids on to education now, they're going to turn their kids on to education. And the cycle continues. So either we're promoting the cycle of success or perpetuating the cycle of misery and marginalization for so much, unfortunately, of our society. And that's why the theme of the equity piece becomes so important. And every child, and we talk about the name project, every child needs to know that someone knows their name. And I often say, once you know my name, you have to prioritize me. You can no longer ignore me. Once you know my name, you have to prioritize me. And that's a choice then that you have to make. And we hope that when we see that, and we alluded to that Mrs. Blaber used to say when she was on the board, it's not about the red X's and the green check marks. It's about kids and knowing their name, and everything that we do needs to come back to that. So we need to have that passion and that compassion in our leadership. And you saw that from the many presenters tonight and the ones who weren't presented here, because that's the standard that I hold myself. That's the standard that I think everyone to a person will say they hold themselves to that very similar standard. And that's the expectation that we get through the most turbulent situations and learn from it. And we're not afraid to go into the most turbulent situations and learn from it, because we know at the end of the day, our kids are dependent on us. So thank you as a board for supporting our leadership, because we are doing a lot of exciting things. And it comes back to here. You as a board saying, hey, go ahead. Do what you need to do on behalf of our kids. So I want to say thank you very much, and thank you for your indulgence and patience tonight as well. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I have some comments. I know it's well into the evening. I'll probably put this in an email to Dr. Robinson, but we do want to direct it towards everybody here who's doing great work here. Plus, on your day-to-day, you're responding to kids in need. You're responding to parents who want to learn more, get direction. And often that's what you're doing to make these things happen, because it's winning one person over to a new idea or new approach. So thanks very much. I know we'd like to wrap up. I know in the past when we have students here, we let the students depart. You okay if people want to leave?
I don't think we have any.
Okay, so we continue on.
They just look young and cheerful.
Okay. Yeah, we just have one action item we have is, can I have a motion to approve the tax certiorari case? First, Mr. Gilbert, second, Mrs. Miller. Any comments, questions on this one? You've all had a chance to look at it. If not, all in favor? Motion passed. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Gilbert, Mrs. Miller, any comments, questions? If not, all in favor? Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good meeting,
Good job.
appreciate it. Thank you for the patience.
No problem.